Kevin Stefanski's exit may have rocked the Cleveland Browns, but what followed has the potential to shake the entire league. Shedeur Sanders, a fifth-round pick with a powerful football legacy, used the moment to ink a contract extension that directly challenges the NFL's tightly held control over player branding. His new deal reportedly gives him autonomy over his likeness and entitles him to a cut of all related earnings, clauses that NFL veterans have struggled to even propose.
If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed.
It's a bold move, especially from someone just breaking into the league. But Sanders isn't just betting on his arm. He's betting on his brand. This shift doesn't just test the limits of what rookie deals can look like. It throws the league's entire model into question. Sanders is showing that athletes no longer need to wait until Pro Bowl appearances or MVP nods to take control of their business. With endorsements, media deals, and merchandise already generating revenue, he's walking proof that the power has started to shift. And if other players follow suit, the NFL structure, as it's existed for decades, may not hold. Shedeur Sanders just signed a contract extension with the Cleveland Browns. Not just any extension, one that effectively rewrites the rules of how power works in the NFL. The announcement dropped right after head coach Kevin Stefanski was fired, which immediately sent shockwaves across the league. Fans barely had time to process Stefanski's exit before news broke that Sanders wasn't just staying. He was staying with terms. This wasn't a typical rookie extension. Sanders, a fifth-round pick with a family name that already carries weight, pulled off what most thought was impossible for someone without a first-round label. His deal reportedly includes control over his name, image, and likeness, and more than that, a cut of the revenue generated from him. In an NFL ecosystem that's notoriously strict about image rights and revenue control, this was no small thing. Then there's the timing. Stefanski is gone, and within hours, Sanders locks in a contract that screams leverage. It's raised more than a few eyebrows around the league. Was this planned? Did the Browns clean house just to make room for a new era, one where players like Sanders get to be more than just employees? For a team that struggled with consistency and internal drama, the optics of this move are loud. One voice leaves, another gets amplified. Stefanski's leadership had its defenders, but toward the end, the cracks were obvious. His exit was inevitable. But what followed next was anything but predictable. The contract's finer points haven't been officially confirmed by the Browns or Sanders reps, but multiple sources have pointed to key details: control of brand, image, likeness, and personal content. A revenue-sharing model typically unheard of for NFL rookies. These aren't just vanity perks, they're power moves, especially in a league where the shield has always come first, and the players have been expected to fall in line. Sanders didn't just break from a mold. He cracked it open and handed it back with edits. And it's not lost on anyone that his approach mirrors strategies used by athletes far beyond football. He's operating like someone who's been coached not just on the field, but in boardrooms. Legacy, business savvy, and a digital native mindset. That's the package the Browns just locked into a long-term deal. It's not like Sanders walked into the league with no pressure. Being drafted in the fifth round comes with its own set of expectations and limits. But he didn't wait for anyone to validate him through stats or team performance. While the Browns had their usual share of ups and downs on the field, Sanders built something that existed independently. His merch, his media presence, his name, it was all working whether the Browns won or lost. And now, after a season full of quarterback rotations, coaching instability, and organizational noise, he's become the central figure in the Browns' future. The Browns aren't just betting on his arm, they're betting on his brand. During training camp, it was already obvious that Sanders carried himself differently. He wasn't just learning the system, he was building a platform. Teammates noticed, coaches noticed, and so did the media. He knew how to work the mic as well as the playbook. For a fifth-round rookie, he had the kind of media polish you usually see from seasoned veterans. That foundation set him up for the kind of contract he just signed. Sanders wasn't reacting to the league. He was shaping how it reacts to him. His training camp wasn't just about earning a starting spot. It was about proving he was more than just another player fighting for a depth chart bump. Kevin Stefanski, for all his tactical experience, struggled to adapt to the changes brewing around the team. His final post-game interviews had the air of someone losing grip, not just on the locker room, but on the shifting landscape of the league itself. In those final weeks, Sanders' influence started to overshadow the head coach, not because of ego, but because of presence. When a player starts answering bigger questions than the coach, something's going to give. And once Stefanski was out, the contract came in fast. Too fast for it to be coincidence. It was a baton pass, not from coach to quarterback, but from an old model to a new. The Browns are now being forced into a new identity, whether they plan for it or not. Sanders' deal represents a pivot not just for the team, but for the entire league. Because if a fifth-rounder can do this, what stops a first-rounder from asking for the same? Or a Pro Bowler? Or a franchise star? NFL executives are watching this very closely. Teams are scrambling to figure out how this slipped through. How did a rookie quarterback flip the power dynamic? How did the Browns, of all franchises, become ground zero for a potential contractual revolution? Meanwhile, Sanders is practicing like nothing changed. That's the part that's really throwing people. There's no visible arrogance, no parade. Just business. He's running plays and working reps, but with the confidence of someone who just shifted the direction of an entire franchise, and maybe the league. His performance on the field matters, sure, but it's no longer the only metric. He's showing that a player's value can live off the field in ways the NFL hasn't fully acknowledged yet. And now that value is in writing. In post-game interviews, Sanders hasn't dodged the elephant in the room. When asked about the timing of his contract extension, he stayed diplomatic but made it clear that this wasn't random. His words were careful, but the message was loud. He's building something intentional. Not just a career, a brand, a legacy. That kind of clarity isn't common for players in their first year, and definitely not for someone drafted late. But Sanders isn't operating on that timeline. He's playing chess while the rest of the league is still flipping the rulebook open. Now, there's a bigger conversation starting to build. If Shedeur Sanders can negotiate this kind of control, what happens next? Will agents start pushing for similar deals? Will players begin viewing their contracts as business partnerships rather than employment agreements? This could be the start of something massive. A cultural shift in the NFL where players don't just suit up, they build empires. And with Sanders leading the charge, backed by a legacy and a media machine, the NFL might have to decide whether it adapts or tries to fight a wave that's already in motion. Don't be surprised if more players follow. The blueprint is now public. The old model just took a direct hit. And the fallout? That's only beginning. If you think this changes everything, or if you've got thoughts on how the league should respond, drop a comment. Hit like if you're watching the NFL Power Balance get flipped in real time. And don't forget to subscribe if you want to keep up with the chaos as it unfolds. This is just the beginning. What makes this story more jarring is how Kevin Stefanski's exit became almost an afterthought. In any other timeline, the firing of a head coach would dominate headlines for weeks, especially when it's a former coach of the year who led the Browns to their first playoff win in decades. But instead, it was a footnote to the Shedeur Sanders era taking full form. The contrast couldn't be clearer. Stefanski represented structure, discipline, the traditional coach-led identity. Sanders is brand, mobility, and autonomy. One was trying to hold onto a franchise identity built on old-school grit. The other is building a completely new one, and doing it on his terms. Once Stefanski was out, it felt like the Browns were shedding an entire skin. At the press conference following the extension, Sanders didn't just sit behind a mic and read prepared answers. He addressed the media like a CEO updating shareholders. Calm, confident, strategic. When asked about the groundbreaking clauses in his contract, he didn't deny them, but he didn't boast either. Instead, He pivoted to vision, long-term planning, organizational alignment. It's the kind of language you don't often hear from quarterbacks, let alone rookies. But Sanders wasn't there to fit in. He was defining a new kind of relationship between player and franchise. He made it clear, this wasn't just about football. This was about impact. All of this is happening while the Browns are still, technically, recovering from a season that barely held together. Quarterback injuries, inconsistent play calling, and locker room misalignment plagued them for months. The team spent more time making headlines for off-field dysfunction than actual wins. And yet, through all of that, Sanders managed to ascend without waiting for anyone's permission. While other rookies were hoping to stay on the depth chart, he was already operating at an executive level. The front office turmoil became the backdrop to something much bigger, an athlete rewriting the hierarchy from within. If you roll the tape back to the early days of training camp, there were already signs this wouldn't be a typical rookie trajectory. Sanders brought a media team with him. Every rep, every throw, every locker room moment, it was documented, clipped, and distributed to his audience in real time. It wasn't just content. It was marketing. It was brand development happening inside an NFL facility. While veterans were focused on playbooks and personnel, Sanders was building equity in a personal platform that operated outside the team's control. The Browns didn't just have a player on their hands, they had a media. When the season went sideways and the losses piled up, Stefanski's post-game interviews became more cautious, more scripted. You could hear the frustration in the pauses. He knew something was shifting, but didn't have the playbook for it. Coaches are taught to lead players, not to negotiate with brands. His comments after the loss to the Rams hinted at growing disconnects between the coaching staff and the locker room. But what he didn't say was even louder. Sanders was already becoming a gravitational force. Stefanski didn't just lose the season. He lost control of it. Around the league, execs are nervous. Not just because Sanders got the deal, but because of how he got it. The old system relies on structure, on players staying in their lane until they earn leverage. But Sanders brought leverage with him. From the minute he arrived, he controlled his image, his content, his public presence. That's what changes the game. It's not just about production anymore. It's about perception, influence, reach. The Browns gave him what he wanted because they saw what he could do with or without them. And now, front offices across the NFL are scrambling to figure out how to stop the next Shedeur from walking in with a business plan and walking out with half the media rights. But here's the kicker. He's still doing the work. Sanders isn't mailing it in on the field. He's staying late after practice. He's asking for extra film sessions. He's mentoring younger players and showing leadership far beyond his age or draft position. He's proving that you can be both an entrepreneur and a teammate. And that's what makes this whole thing harder to ignore. Because it's not just a flashy power play. It's grounded in performance and discipline. The Browns aren't indulging a diva. They're investing in someone who's already shown he can outperform expectations, both on and off the field. After the win against the Bengals late in the season, Sanders was asked whether the coaching change affected his mindset. He didn't dodge. He said it was part of the business, but emphasized that the team had to evolve. It wasn't a shot, it was a statement. He spoke like someone who saw the bigger picture. Not just wins and losses, but structure, culture, and the future of athlete empowerment. That's what's been so different about him. Every media interaction feels like a calculated move, not for attention, but for direction. He's steering the ship now. And it's working. Fans aren't just watching for the Browns anymore. They're watching for Shedeur. They're buying his merch. They're reposting his quotes. He's become a standalone product inside a team that's still trying to rebrand itself. That kind of pull is rare. That kind of autonomy? Almost unheard of. The NFL knows it. Other players know it. And now, agents are watching too. It's only a matter of time before this kind of deal becomes the template for athletes who bring more than just stats. If you come with audience, influence, and an off-field business, you've got leverage. And Shedeur just showed them how to use it. In his most recent press conference, Sanders addressed the attention with a level of clarity that cut through the noise. He said the league is changing, that athletes are learning their value in real time, and that the game is evolving beyond the field. He wasn't just talking about himself. He was laying the groundwork for a movement. He didn't need to say it directly, but the implication was loud. If the NFL doesn't adapt, it risks losing control of its narrative to the very players it once dictated it to. Sanders isn't just betting on himself. He's betting that others will follow. And honestly, they probably will. So if you've been watching this thinking, this is just one player, you might want to think again. The dominoes are lining up. The league can either resist or recalibrate. What's hitting people now is how different the tone inside the Browns facility must feel without Kevin Stefanski. For 4 years, his voice was the filter through which the team's decisions were explained. He was deliberate, controlled, and sometimes guarded, more comfortable talking scheme than shifting culture. But the NFL in 2026 isn't the league he walked into in 2020. The balance has changed. Players aren't just part of a system anymore. They are the system. And Stefanski, for all his football intelligence, never seemed ready to handle a player like Shedeur Sanders, one who brought in cameras, contracts, and conversations that extended way beyond the field. Shedeur has managed to become the face of a franchise without being its statistical leader. He isn't throwing 50 touchdowns or breaking records every week, but he's dominating a different scoreboard, the one that measures cultural relevance. The Browns may still be building their playbook, but Sanders already wrote his. And let's be clear, none of this is by accident. His interviews are sharp. His branding is airtight. His statements toe the line between athlete and executive. He's not throwing words around for headlines. Every phrase is intentional. Every answer is a move in the long game. During his most recent media appearance, Sanders laid out the blueprint again. He said the NFL is evolving, and players have to evolve with it, or get left behind. That kind of statement doesn't just apply to rookies trying to make a name. It's a direct challenge to how the league operates. You could see the shift in the room. Reporters weren't just jotting down notes. They were witnessing the rollout of a new kind of playbook, one built on ownership, autonomy, and brand awareness. For decades, NFL players have been told to stick to football. Sanders is making it impossible to separate the. It's a wild contrast when you remember what the Browns used to stand for: grit, ground game, defensive toughness, the kind of team that measured wins in inches and attitude. But now they've got a quarterback who sees the entire league as a stage, and a front office that just signed off on it. This isn't about abandoning identity. It's about redefining it. Shedeur isn't undoing the Browns' history. He's turning it into something marketable, something future-proof. Because if the old playbook was about surviving, the new one is about thriving, even when the scoreboard isn't in your favor. Back in training camp, it became obvious that Sanders didn't just come to learn the system. He came to build his own lane within it. Players watched as his social media team captured moments that would end up on national broadcasts within hours. That kind of visibility doesn't just happen. It's orchestrated. The Browns may have seen it as a distraction at first, but they quickly realized they were looking at a walking brand asset. Sanders wasn't stealing the spotlight. He was the spotlight. And rather than resist it, the team leaned in. Because if one player can bring millions of new eyes to your locker room, you let him cook. Contrast that with Stefanski's energy during the final games of the season. His post-game interviews were tired. His words felt disconnected. He knew something had changed, but he didn't have the tools, or maybe the freedom, to address it. The game wasn't just about X's and O's anymore. When the locker room begins aligning with a player over a coach, it's not just a chemistry problem. It's a power shift. And once the Browns realized who was moving the needle, on the field, online, and in every media cycle, they made their. Now the league is watching Cleveland not as a struggling team, but as a test case. What happens when you give a player this much power? How do you keep control of your brand when one athlete owns their own image and profits from it directly? It's not just teams that are anxious. It's the league office. Because if Sanders' contract becomes a model, The NFL will need to reinvent its entire approach to rookie deals, revenue distribution, and media rights. That's not a shift. That's a structural detonation. And while all that swirls behind closed doors, Sanders is out on the practice field doing what rookies are supposed to do: hone their craft. He's not skipping drills. He's not big-timing teammates. He's doing the work. But when practice ends, he walks off the field knowing he's also shaping policy at the highest level of pro sports. There's a reason he doesn't seem rattled. This isn't a gamble for him. It's a calculated execution of a plan that's been years in the making. From NIL deals in college to brand partnerships, Sanders came into the league with a structure most rookies couldn't dream of. Post-game, he talks like someone twice his age. There's no fluff, no accidental hot takes. He understands that every mic in front of him is an opportunity and a tool. He's not waiting for the NFL to tell his story. He's producing it himself, syndicating it, and monetizing it before the next play is called. What he's doing isn't just savvy, it's disruptive. And it's already forcing agents, players, and owners to think differently about what value really means in this league. Because for Sanders, value isn't a stat line. It's how far your name travels when the game's over. The most telling moment came during a recent press Q&A when Sanders was asked what advice he'd give incoming rookies. He didn't mention playbooks or footwork. He said, "Know who you are before the league tries to tell you." That line landed like a manifesto. It's a kind of mindset that rattles the foundations of a league built on conformity. Sanders isn't just making noise. He's building a new architecture for what it means to be a player in 2026. And whether the NFL likes it or not, that future is already here. If you're tracking this story and wondering where the next seismic shift is coming from, it's probably going to have Shedeur Sanders' name attached to it. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Does this mark a new chapter for player control? Smash the like button if you think the old guard just got benched. And subscribe so you don't miss what happens when the league finally pushes back.